Welcome to the debate. Right now, the corner bakery in your neighborhood might be running a more sophisticated data analytics stack than a Wall Street hedge fund did in, 2015.
Yeah, it's pretty wild to think about.
It really is. Today, we are dissecting the hidden nervous system of local business. We're looking at what happens when micro entrepreneurs stop relying solely on, elbow grease and start plugging enterprise-grade artificial intelligence into their daily grind.
It is a massive structural shift. I mean, visually, that corner bakery or the independent hardware store looks exactly like it did 20 years ago, right?
Right, totally.
There is this comforting permanence to the storefront. But the underlying machinery of how it actually operates, how it processes information, and how it survives hour by hour is entirely different today.
And that hidden transformation is exactly what we are dissecting today, drawing directly from our source material on modern business infrastructure. We really need to answer a very specific question.
Yeah, basically. Does AI automation genuinely level the playing field for small businesses by drastically reducing daily operational costs? Or does it merely shift the operational burden from manual labor to complex tool orchestration, creating a ruthless new baseline for basic survival?
To state my position right out of the gate, AI is an unprecedented democratizing force acting as a lean growth engine that fundamentally transforms small business economics by turning fixed cost labor into a flexible layer, automating day-to-day operations so solo entrepreneurs can compete directly with large corporations.
And my position is that while the reduction in routine manual costs is absolutely real, it does not automatically equal a competitive advantage, because the true operational burden simply shifts to human AI orchestration, threatening to commoditize the vital personal touch that makes local businesses unique unless managed incredibly carefully.
So let's start with the mechanics of that daily cost reduction, because the shift in the baseline economics of a local shop is, well, it's staggering. We are talking about how a micro business actually saves money hour by hour.
Right.
Our source material notes that AI primarily reduces costs by absorbing routine tasks that would otherwise eat up incredibly valuable human hours. Think about the daily reality of a small business owner.
Yeah, it's grueling.
Let's take a local HVAC contractor, for example. Historically, their Sunday night is completely ruined by back-office administration. Data entry, scheduling, cross-referencing supplier invoices.
The invisible second shift of running a small business.
Exactly. But now look at the mechanics of what happens. An invoice arrives as a PDF in an email. An AI extraction algorithm instantly identifies the parts cost, cross-references it with the supplier's live database via simple API integration, calculates the contractor's standard markup, and drops it perfectly categorized into their accounting software.
Wow.
Yeah, what used to take 3 hours of manual entry now takes 4 seconds. And this is made possible by no-code workflow engines.
Which sounds incredibly intimidating to a lot of people. I mean, let's be honest.
Right, the jargon sounds complex. But when we say no-code workflow engine, think of it as digital plumbing. You're literally just dragging a line on your screen to connect your email inbox to your spreadsheet, telling the system to extract the number and pipe it over there.
Right, but still,
It is highly accessible. And this creates what I view as an elastic operational grid for the small business.
an elastic operational grid. I want you to expand on how you mean that in practice, because that sounds a lot like corporate speak for firing the receptionist.
Not at all. I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective. Think of an electrical grid. When you plug in a toaster, the power plant dynamically ramps up wattage to meet the draw, and you only pay for exactly what you use.
Okay, I'm following.
AI does this for labor. Historically, labor is a fixed cost. You hire an assistant, you pay them for 40 hours, regardless of whether you have 10 invoices to process or 1,000.
You're locked in.
Right, you are locked in. But with AI, that fixed cost labor transforms into a utility. Let's say a local boutique's TikTok video goes viral. Suddenly they have 500 customer inquiries about shipping times.
Which usually breaks a small business.
Exactly. But here, the AI grid instantly spins up enough customer service instances to catch the surge, answering everyone perfectly in seconds, and then it simply powers down when the surge is over. The labor scales automatically. You don't have to hire temporary staff or pay overtime. It compresses the feedback loops entirely and saves massive amounts of capital.
Wait, hold on. We have to pause there.
because framing this democratization as a frictionless utility completely ignores the reality of the small business owner. I come at it from a different way.
Okay, how so?
I acknowledge the complete elimination of that traditional administrative overhead. I really do. But viewing this as a pure cost savings without a trade-off is a dangerous oversimplification.
Why is it dangerous?
If you're listening to this and thinking, well, my local plumber barely knows how to manage his email, how on earth is he going to manage an autonomous AI agent? That's exactly the friction point we're talking about. The system is not autonomous in the way people assume. It requires constant, vigilant oversight.
But the material points out that these are now production-grade capabilities. They are highly reliable at executing the tasks they are given.
They are reliable at execution, yes, but they lack inherent judgment. The source material makes a critical distinction here.
Which is?
The real competitive advantage is not simply owning the tool. Anyone can buy a software subscription. The advantage is knowing how to orchestrate multiple tools into intelligent workflows that consistently solve real human problems without breaking.
Right.
So what happens to the small business owner in this scenario? Their labor doesn't magically disappear, it just shifts. They stop being a bookkeeper and a receptionist, and they are forced to become a system administrator.
I would argue that being a system administrator who governs a highly efficient digital workflow is vastly more valuable and profitable than manually typing data from a receipt into a spreadsheet.
More valuable, perhaps, but also a completely different cognitive load. If you are a local florist, you opened your shop because you understand floral design and local events, not because you wanted to manage API integrations and audit the output of a language model.
Fair point.
The automation isn't a magical cost leader. The owner is still spending hours, but now those hours are spent refining prompts, checking for logical errors in generated copy, and ensuring the AI's output actually aligns with their brand.
But the time spent managing the AI is a fraction of the time spent doing the manual labor. You audit the system for 20 minutes instead of doing data entry for 4 hours. And the payoff for that orchestration is exactly what allows these micro-entrepreneurs to step onto a leveled playing field with massive competitors.
I'm not so sure about that.
Because once that baseline admin is automated, the local shop can utilize enterprise-grade tools to grow.
But that exact capability, the fact that a local shop can now mimic a global supply chain's efficiency, is what leads to my biggest fear here. When you try to scale local commerce with enterprise logic, you risk losing the soul of the business.
I disagree, because the logic itself is brilliant. Let's look at how predictive analytics actually functions now for a small business.
Okay, lay it out.
For decades, if you wanted to do sophisticated demand forecasting or dynamic pricing, you needed deep pockets and a data science team. Now, a local hardware store doesn't have to guess how many snow shovels to stock based on gut instinct or last year's almanac.
Because they are plugging into larger data streams?
Precisely. And it's not magic, it's just mapping correlations. The AI pulls in 10 years of historical zip code data, correlates past hardware sales with the weather API data, and automatically triggers an alert to the distributor when a specific humidity and temperature threshold is crossed.
That is impressive.
It perfectly optimizes inventory levels. This prevents costly overstocking or understocking mistakes. The small shop can now operate with the exact same analytical precision as a multinational big box retailer. That is a profound leveling of the playing field.
That's a compelling argument, but have you considered what happens to the customer experience when a local shop tries to mimic a multinational corporation? I'll grant you the inventory management. Logistics is a math problem, and AI is fantastic at math.
Right, it really is.
As the customer experience is different. The paradox of AI in local business is that you actually have to use machines to scale your humanity.
Exactly. It doesn't replace the relationship, it enhances it through hyper-personalization. Think about a local baker. Before, they could maybe remember the names of their top 10 regulars.
Sure.
Now the AI CRM tracks the purchase history, birthdays, and gluten allergies of 1,000 customers. When a regular walks in or orders online, the system prompts the baker to ask how their kid's birthday party went, or ensures a perfectly tailored recommendation is ready. That level of personalized touch was previously impossible at scale.
In theory, yes, that is a beautiful use case,
But let's look at the mechanics of how this is actually deployed in the real world.
Okay.
When the financial cost of running an AI chatbot is practically zero, the temptation is to automate all customer touchpoints, not just the background logistics. Why do people go to the independent bookstore instead of buying online?
For the experience, usually.
Exactly. They go for the human warmth. They go for the quirky, highly subjective recommendations of the owner.
And the AI handles the basic inquiries, like what are your hours, so the owner has the bandwidth to give those quirky recommendations.
But the material notes that these tools are being used to offer automated recommendation engines and 24/7 support. Let's break down why that is a problem.
I'm listening.
Because these local shops are largely tapping into the exact same foundational models. The voice of their automated customer service inevitably regresses to the same polite corporate mean.
I see what you mean.
If I message my local bookstore and I get an instant, perfectly formatted, slightly sterile AI-generated response based on my previous purchase history, well, I might as well be shopping on a global e-commerce platform. They are stripping away the localized personality that made them special.
Yeah, that's fair.
The financial cost of running the chatbot is zero, but the cost of homogenizing your service is existentially high. You lose your local loyalty.
You know, I'll actually concede that point. The risk of homogenization, of losing that distinct brand voice by lazily relying on default chatbot settings, is a real danger.
It's a huge danger.
If you just copy and paste the default prompt, you will sound like a generic corporate entity. But where I disagree is the assumption that local owners won't learn to adapt. The material explicitly states that the best outcomes emerge when people treat AI tools as co-pilots rather than total replacements.
Right, but that assumes a lot.
The owner inputs their unique voice and guidelines, and the AI simply scales it.
But that assumes the owner has the time, the technical literacy, and the desire to meticulously blend the human and the artificial. And that brings us to the trajectory of where this market is heading.
Where do you think it's heading?
The source material outlines a reality where one person manages entire digital businesses powered by a network of AI assistants.
I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning because it implies it's too complex. Yes, assistants handling market research, drafting marketing content, engaging in customer interaction, and doing operational follow-up.
It's a lot to manage.
But the sheer scale of output a single solopreneur can achieve now is breathtaking. We are looking at a fundamental shift from a cost-center mentality to a value-center mentality.
How so?
The owner isn't spending time and money on the mechanics of work. They are spending it on high-level strategy and outcomes. If you have a vision, the AI handles the execution.
But if everyone can do it easily, the advantage disappears entirely. If everyone scales their operation to this massive output, what happens to the local market?
They innovate faster. They create new value for the consumer because the barrier to entry for executing complex ideas is obliterated.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why.
Go ahead.
The text carries a very clear warning about this that I think you are brushing past. It states that AI is becoming part of the basic infrastructure of modern business. It is foundational, much like the internet or cloud computing once did.
Right, it's a proven capability handling real money and real users.
Exactly. And what happens when a technology becomes basic infrastructure? It ceases to be a competitive advantage.
You think so?
I do. It becomes the infrastructure trap. If every local competitor, every micro-entrepreneur in your sector has access to the exact same lean growth engines, the exact same predictive analytics, and the exact same generative content tools, then drastically reducing your daily operational costs isn't a strategic win.
Then what is it?
It is simply the new baseline for survival.
Well, it establishes a new standard of efficiency across the board, yes? But that efficiency still benefits the business by keeping them alive in a competitive market, and it clearly benefits the consumer through better service.
But look at the crushing operational pressure it creates. The material explicitly states that organizations that fail to integrate AI into their workflows are not just missing an efficiency gain, they are actively being outcompeted.
That's true.
This democratization actually forces local shops into a mandatory, high-stakes technological arms race. You aren't choosing to adopt AI to get ahead. You are being forced to adopt AI orchestrate multiple tools, and manage complex workflows just to avoid drowning.
But the arms race is fought with highly accessible tools. 10 years ago, the cost of participating in this kind of advanced economy meant hiring a full marketing department, a logistics coordinator, and an accounting firm.
Sure.
Now the cost of participation is learning to effectively prompt a low-code workflow engine. The financial barrier has plummeted to essentially zero.
The financial cost barrier has plummeted, yes, but the cognitive and operational complexity barrier has skyrocketed.
I wouldn't say skyrocketed.
You are asking a micro-entrepreneur to be a master of their craft, baking, plumbing, floristry, and simultaneously act as a chief technology officer managing autonomous AI agents that are executing multi-step projects across applications.
They don't have to build the complex tools from scratch, though. They just have to direct them. They set the goal, they provide the context, and they refine the outputs. That is the co-pilot model.
Directing them effectively requires an entirely new, highly unforgiving skill set. Let's look at the reality of operational failure in these systems.
Okay, what about it?
When a human makes a mistake, it usually happens once. When an automated workflow makes a mistake, it cascades at machine speed. Let's say your predictive pricing model hallucinates or glitches because of a poorly defined parameter, and it applies a 90% discount to your entire inventory.
Which is why you put approval gates in the workflow.
If you know how. But if that agent auto-publishes that pricing to Shopify and another automated agent blasts an email to your 5,000-person subscriber list promoting the accidental fire sale, a local shop can be bankrupted in 20 minutes before the owner even checks their phone.
That's a nightmare scenario, yeah.
The large corporation has a dedicated IT team to monitor these systems and catch cascading logic errors. The local shop owner does not.
That is exactly why human-in-the-loop oversight is necessary and why the source material stresses treating the AI as a co-pilot, not an autopilot. But the incredible efficiency gained far outweighs the oversight required.
You think the risk is worth it?
Absolutely. A task that took weeks, like designing a new service offering, running a localized marketing campaign, and analyzing the resulting customer data to see what worked, now takes hours.
Right.
That profound time compression allows the small business to catch mistakes earlier and pivot their strategy before big capital investments are locked in. It turns a reactive, firefighting mode of operation into a proactive, data-driven one.
I agree that the time compression is real. It is staggering how fast things move now. But my concern remains that compressing the time it takes to execute a task also naturally compresses the time you have to think critically about it.
That's an interesting point.
When you are pushing out content, dynamic pricing updates, and inventory orders at machine speed, the margin for human error in that oversight process becomes incredibly thin. The local owner is exhausted, they click approve on an AI-generated workflow without fully reading the logic, and the mistake scales instantly.
Which brings us back to the core of what we are debating today. Let's summarize where we stand on this profound transformation of the local business landscape.
Let's do it.
My stance is that AI fundamentally empowers the micro-entrepreneur by obliterating traditional barriers to entry. By acting as an elastic operational grid, it drastically reduces daily operational costs, absorbing the data entry, the scheduling, the tedious admin.
Right.
It transforms what used to be rigid, fixed-cost labor into dynamic, scalable action. By utilizing these no-code tools and predictive analytics, a single owner can run operations that previously required entire departments, allowing them to compete on a genuinely leveled playing field.
And my view is that while AI absolutely strips away administrative fat and lowers financial barriers, it simultaneously establishes a ruthless new operational baseline. The local businesses are thrust into a mandatory arms race.
Yeah.
To survive, they must master complex digital orchestration, taking on the cognitive load of a systems administrator. The true challenge is surviving this new baseline without homogenizing their service and sacrificing the vital human touch that makes a local business valuable in the first place.
Despite our different lenses, we do have a very clear point of convergence here, drawing from the source text. We both entirely agree that AI has moved permanently out of the realm of futuristic experiment for small businesses.
Oh, definitely.
It is not a prototype. It is running quietly in production right now, handling millions of interactions across local shops everywhere.
Absolutely. It is a mandatory, embedded layer of modern business operations. Pretending it is a passing trend or deciding you are just going to opt out is a fast recipe for obsolescence.
Exactly.
And we also completely agree that treating AI as a co-pilot, where the human sets the goal, provides the guardrails, and ensures quality, rather than a total hands-off replacement, is the only sustainable way forward.
Integrating enterprise-level technology into local-level commerce is incredibly complex. Our source material contains a wealth of deeper information regarding how these specific workflow engines operate, the exact mathematical mechanisms of predictive analytics, and the operational guardrails required to navigate this shift without breaking your business logic.
There is certainly much more to explore regarding how a solopreneur actually builds and audits these intelligent workflows day to day without burning out.
So the next time you walk down that local main street and look at those familiar brick-and-mortar storefronts, realize you aren't just looking at a traditional shop.
You really aren't.
You are looking at a complex human-AI orchestration layer, quietly mapping correlations, predicting demand, and operating at machine speed just behind the counter. Whether that invisible machinery truly frees the local entrepreneur to focus on their craft, or simply changes the nature of their daily grind into managing servers, is something we will leave you to decide.